Welcome, this is Colorado Cinema Spotlight. I'm your host, David Rasmussen, and we're pleased to be here this month with our guest, David Quakenbush.
Hello.
Welcome, nice to have you here with us. I'm glad you could make it. We usually start these at the beginning, learning a little bit about how you first kind of got interested in filmmaking and
Sure.
maybe what your first film was.
Sure. It's hard to, I'm not even sure where to start that. As a little kid, we moved around a lot.
Yeah.
And we lived in Montana for a little while. And I spent a lot of time trying to convince one of the neighborhood kids that I owned a time machine. And so we built, and one of my other friends was in on it. And so we built this like contraption out of old stereo parts in the basement. And then we brought him in, and he was like younger by a few years. Little kids have a big difference.
Yeah, taking
right, and so
of this
we like put in
innocence,
earplugs and we blindfold him. We clip wires to him, and then we turn off all of the lights in there and leave, and we wait, and like we go watch TV and wait for him to come out. And then when he comes out, we were confused about why he's in our house, and we just pretend like it was a week prior. And after working on that for a while, I get the sense he kind of started to believe it, and then didn't. But he almost did, and it was a good story. Much later in high school, I had a friend who, he and I would learn magic tricks together. And we got to the point where we were doing birthday parties like card tricks and sleight of hand and stuff. It was always really exciting when you pull off a trick and the audience believes it and you kind of get away with it.
Yeah.
And then like that magic happens, even though you know it's completely just like an illusion and you've got stuff in your sleeve or in your hand and you're hiding it.
Yeah.
And so for me, like I really like that feeling that I sort of like I got away with getting someone to believe a story. And so that is what's really exciting about filmmaking for me. My very first film, like is edited,
with the camera,
edited, time-based, and it was cut together to a soundtrack. It was, gosh, I don't know what the year was. It's got to be like 10 years ago now.
Okay.
It was one of those days in the spring when it just dumps a bunch of snow, and like the whole, and I'm in Denver, and the whole city shuts down because no one can get anywhere, and all the roads are clogged up.
Great.
You know,
Perfect.
and you know, the next day it's 80 and it melts and it's gone. But for that one day, everybody's just at home waiting. And I was doing graphic design at the time, and I realized I had iMovie in my laptop. And I thought, well, today I'm going to play with iMovie and see what that's all about. And so I got the movie Forbidden Planet, which is a great film.
Oh yeah, isn't that wonderful? Great story.
And I figured out how to get that into iMovie, and then I cut a little music video of like Roby the Robot singing "Jump Around" by House of Pain. And it took all day long, but I was really like, it was delightful at the end. And after that, I was sort of hooked. And so I never really thought about making film before that.
Really?
Really, and but after I did that, it was just like profoundly entertaining to put that together and have it work. Then I just started making more like random little projects. So I went, like I got a Handycam for $90 at the returned item bin at Best Buy.
Yeah.
And then I shot like miles and miles of tape with that, just like filming, like everywhere we went, I would just film everything that was going on. And some of it I would edit, some of it I would just like not watch the tapes again.
Right. But
yeah, so those projects slowly started to get better. And then at work, I started doing, like everybody was supposed to give a presentation about what their department does. And I thought I would make a little video instead. And it was terrible and no one will ever see it.
Right.
But that was the first thing that had an actual audience, I guess. And the following year, like our customer service director, Elena Rule, who's amazing, wanted to do like a musical. It was the Carpenters singing Winter Wonderland. And we had the whole staff like singing and dancing in the office. And so we did that together.
Okay.
But it was my $90 Handycam on top of a photography tripod. And for a boom mic, we had like a cheap Radio Shack lavalier taped to the end of a broomstick.
Right.
And one of the like customer service guys was like holding this like wooden stick dangling like right on the edge of frame.
Perfect.
It was great.
That's all it is, really.
But so they just kept getting more complicated to the point where I realized I was like at the ceiling for what I could do without actually going and getting like a proper like education. And I had written a script for a feature. It's like 90 pages long, which I'll never shoot because one of the things I learned at film school is that it's a terrible story.
Yes.
But I realized that I would never get better unless I like went somewhere and got like a proper education. I was at the limit of what I could just make up on my own in my garage. And so I went to Colorado Film School.
Okay.
Did that. That was like 100 films ago.
Yeah.
And just,
yeah.
and
That,
just
that
keep
you did
making
there
them.
and since, or in
Yeah,
school you did
they're
100
in,
films?
they're in Sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what was the school experience like? Would you highly recommend that to other people? Was it just a step along the way? Did you learn a lot there, or did you learn what not to
Well,
do?
it's the thing I like about that particular school is it's very hands-on, and it's like it's a 2-year program that I went
Right.
through, and it's through a community college, so it doesn't really have that sort of prestige if you went to NYU or UCLA or somewhere. But it's super hands-on. Like your first production class, the first year, you make 4 movies.
Yeah.
And
Good.
instead of doing 3 years of theory and then you make 1, you're constantly on set and constantly shooting and constantly lighting. So the experience of just shooting a lot with access to better equipment and people who know how to use it
Yeah.
was highly useful.
Yeah.
But it's like anything else, the more you put into it, the more you get out of it.
Yeah.
So if you go in there and expect them to hand you the education,
It does. It does.
you're going to graduate and not be any better.
Yeah, so I want to go back a little bit. Growing up, didn't you watch films, television? Were there filmmakers, certain things that made an impression on you, or not until you started making your own films?
Well, I live in America, so I watch TV all the time.
Right.
But it never really seemed like something I wanted to grow up and do.
Okay.
And everybody watches films. It's just part of the culture, I mean, literature is something that you do if you're trying to be prestigious.
Right.
The real culture lives in film right now, in television, and
Video, at least. Yeah.
yeah. And so I don't know that you could not be influenced by that stuff just growing up here. But at the same time, it was never a goal to grow up and make things to show in the theater.
So films didn't have a big impact on you, or a certain filmmaker you didn't really like their work?
Not in the sense that I idolized them and I really wanted to follow in their footsteps. Okay. Everybody has favorites. Growing up, I read a lot of science fiction. So I read a lot of Douglas Adams, who I read him before I had any context for his work. So he's describing this mysterious and bizarre world.
That's such a fit for you, really.
Right, and now I go to reread it now, and I'm actually really disappointed because I see that he's doing literal satire to the political situation and stuff that was going on back then. But when I read it, I didn't know any of that context. So it was this really weird world that he had invented. And I read that at a really young and impressionable age. So I'm pretty sure my perception of reality is damaged by Douglas Adams.
He'd like that. That would be a compliment.
Right. It's great. I really miss him. Same thing goes for Monty Python, which was always on late night on reruns on MTV.
Yeah.
And again, if you look at the context they were writing it, each of those was political satire and commentary about things that were going on. But I didn't know any of the backstory.
Yeah.
And so I'm pretty sure there's a little ghost of John Cleese in the back of my mind that is always making me say and do inappropriate things because they're fundamentally hilarious.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a filmmaker who does what you do. When you talk about wanting to kind of create this reality out of illusion, but really make the audience believe it, like the Time Machine Box.
Right.
I can't think of film. I mean, I'm sure there are, but they don't come to my mind right away. That is sort of a unique approach to the visual and to the filmmaker that I don't think you see as often as you do the usual Hollywood, and certainly not the television stuff in the background.
And part of what film school is all about Hollywood and getting you out there and plugged into a job. And so I was sort of brainwashed by that for a little while, to the point where I wrote a business plan and I was going to do a production company, and I have all these feature script ideas sort of racked up and ready to drop money into. But I realized that the industry, I wasn't being authentic with myself pursuing that. That isn't really what excited me about it. And the closer I got to actually launching that plan, the more depressed I got about it. It became this, it turned this wonderful passion into this chore.
Yeah.
And that's the wrong direction that I want to go. So that, and that was a really recent epiphany.
Yeah.
And so string theory and aquaphobia came after, immediately, sort of on the tails of that. I could look more at things that that tied more directly into that sort of passion.
I think when people see your films, they'll realize that you do have that real playfulness to what you do, and that really experimenting sense in everything you do. And I think that is really a quality of your filmmaking. It's quite unique, quite remarkable.
Thanks.
Okay, well let's head toward one of those films. The first one we're going to look at is String Theory.
Right.
So what kind of inspired this film or a film like this? Where do you begin to come towards something like this?
Everything builds off of everything else that you've ever done. So String Theory didn't come out of nowhere. It wasn't, I sat up in bed one day and I thought, I'm going to make this amazing thing about a girl wrapped in string dancing with fans and powder and stuff. But I had done previous projects, I enjoy painting actresses white. like
yeah.
body painting or creating
Yeah.
more stylized spaces like that.
Yeah.
I really am interested in and wanted more practice doing like time manipulation and time ramping.
Right.
And I've done it in other projects, but it wasn't really successful.
Yeah, so you knew it was something you wanted to work
So
on.
I wanted to sort of conquer that set of effects. At the same time, I write and direct some pieces, but usually I'm cinematographer on a greater volume. You know, in the time it takes me to put one of my own projects together, I can DP like 6 other shorts. So I'm always shooting with other people,
Yeah.
which is great because that's where you meet everybody and network and build up the
Sure.
community. So I was shooting this this really unusual like Roman Empire movie.
For
And
someone else.
For someone else,
Right.
right? It is this sort of quirky Croatian guy,
Yeah.
who I'm not going to name, but someday you'll meet him, and you'll know who I'm talking about. Sorry. Anyway, he had a production designer on who was building like costumes for the barbarians and organizing the Romans and dressing the sets and stuff, named Adriana Veal. And she is actually out of London, but she's from here. And so whenever she has to like refresh her visa or however that sort of ridiculous paperwork works,
Right.
she comes back and she like stays with her mother and she's here like through Christmas.
Okay.
And she works really hard to get on as many projects
Yeah.
as she can because she's like me, she can't sit still and always wants to be working on something.
Good for her.
So she was on that show, and we kind of clicked and agreed that we had someday we should find something to work on. So we sort of Facebooked back and forth like for about a year and a half, like all of this concept stuff. Like we should do something with fabric, and there were these other sort of dance films that somebody did where people were covered in powder and they would have really stark movements, and they would like poof off of them.
Yeah.
And it was in
Yeah.
black and backlit, so it kind of
Yeah.
glow and float around. So that was going along, and she was back here on holiday last year, and her mother was who's a fine artist in Denver, and she was doing a series of works about bound figures. So she had a bunch of little dolls, and she was like wrapping them up with string and tying them. And so the 3 of us got together, and it just sort of emerged that there should be a film about this. And so it was really, you can't separate whose idea was whose.
Right,
And
right.
it was the 3 of us just like sort of playing in a sort of open, collaborative sense. And it just sort of happened. You know, we had we met for lunch, we had one meeting, and we talked about just sort of randomly brainstormed what the set should be. Morgan, who was the dancer in it, is somebody that I met on another film. It was something, did you interview Louis Leslie?
Not yet. No. we
Great.
haven't.
Well, it was like a slasher flick that he was doing. And so this was a girl who gets like murdered by a chainsaw killer halfway through the film. But it turns
Very
out,
different role, needless to
and
say.
it turns out she was, like she does a lot of beauty pageants, and she's also a dancer.
Okay.
And so she is somebody that I like had in the back of my mind. If I ever have a dancey project,
Wow.
like, I should get Morgan on board with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And so I call her up on string theory, and it turns out she went to high school with Adriana, and so they were already friends. And so she came over, and so we had a couple of meetings at Sophia's gallery, and Sophia is Adriana's mother. So we had a couple of meetings at the gallery where we had some fabric, and we were just playing with like some dance movements and stuff. And we came up with a few like individual beats that we knew we wanted to get in there, but we weren't sure how
Yeah.
it was all going to fit together.
Yeah.
And then the next weekend, we just like hung a bunch of stuff in her studio and shot it. And then a week later, it was done.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Before you get into more detail, because we want to talk about it, I'm dying to talk about it. Let's show it to them so everybody can actually see what we're talking about. Because
Great.
it's just this beautiful piece, and it flows so beautifully. And I think that'll give everybody a much better idea of what we're talking about.
Cool.
You know, and who you are.
Great.
Okay, so we're going to watch this. All right, this is your first film from our guest filmmaker, David Quakenbush. It's called String Theory. This is Colorado Cinema Spotlight, and that was String Theory by our filmmaker David Quakenbush.
And Sophia Rose and Adriana Veal. It's three of us on that one.
Right. Okay, great. Really beautiful, beautiful film. And you were talking about getting the time things in there, and I think that's amazing how that comes across. Really well put together.
Cool.
So, okay, has this particular film had any screenings?
It's
What kind of response?
Screened at the Emerging Filmmakers Project in Denver, where everything screens.
Yeah.
And then it was at the Film Festival of Colorado last year, and it won Best Experimental Short, and it won an Audience Choice Award too.
Yeah.
And then it's gone off to a couple of other festivals, and I didn't go with it, so I don't know if they actually screened or not. But
Great, great. Okay, so you were saying the three of you all got together, and then the dancer too, and kind of pulled this together ahead of time, and then you did the shoot.
Right.
And it's just remarkable. Just setting up the space is incredible. But
And that
then to
is-
figure out the movement
And the full width of that is, like her gallery is a little shoebox, so that what you see in frame is like wall to wall of the
Right.
gallery. So we dressed the whole end of the shop, sort of.
yeah,
So there was
Yeah.
no width.
yeah,
So like in the film, at the beginning at least, you get the sense that she's like sort of proceeding through different regions, and
Yeah,
she just
you
kept
do.
crossing the same room over and over. Like she crawled across once, and then she like stood up halfway on the next pass.
yeah.
Like it's a really small room that we're shooting in.
And you did all the camera work. Or
I
did you have
did,
somebody else handling it?
I did some of the camera work, and then James Drake from 5K Insight.
Okay.
I had the weekend free, and he and Kevin Andrews came down and shot with his Red Epic,
Okay.
and so we had mixed formats.
Okay.
So he and Kevin were operating a lot of the shots that have the best slow motion. We shot with the Epic, which is an amazing camera because when you're editing it, you can the dust that comes off of her is baby powder,
Yeah.
and if you pause the raw footage, you can see each particle of baby powder in the cloud. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So we shot about a third of the film with the Red Epic, and then the rest of it with the DSLR. And then we had Vadim Elkind was there, and Jonathan Fulton was there, and I think we had 4 or 5 cameras sometimes running, just like crowded
Okay.
around. Everyone was doing a different,
Okay.
like a different aspect of just shooting whatever Morgan was up to.
And did you give her a movement to do or something, and everybody filmed it, and then you planned another movement? Or
Some
how
of
did you-
it-
How did you?
Some
organize
of it
this?
we had specific movements in mind, and then some
Like
of
when
it.
she wrapped the arm around the.
Yeah, so some of it when she was wrapping and pulling the string and stuff. And that was really important to Sophia. Like that was her vision, were those shots with
Right.
the dust coming off, and Adriana as well. And then when she's struggling, like at one point, when the music gets frantic, she's kind
Yeah.
of being attacked by all the fabric, and she's fighting back. And all of that, she just improv'd. And then we did a lot of coverage to make sure we got like enough stuff that we could edit that together.
Okay. Okay.
And then the opening, when she sort of hatches, we just sort of walked through that progressively.
Oh yeah.
And so we
Right.
and we shot that almost sort of like documentary style. Like, okay, first you're in the egg, how do we get you out? And we figured out a couple of shots to get that done. Now that you're out, how do we get you like on your feet?
Right.
And so we just sort of figured that out as we went along.
Yeah.
It was really organic, the process of putting it together.
Amazing that it comes together that well. Okay, but then the music aspect of it too. Did you have the music ahead of time, or did you put that to it later? or-
Adriana found that. It's a royalty-free track that she found online somewhere.
Okay.
And she just sort of provided that. I did the edit, but I don't know where she got it. She handed me the music file and I said, we should cut it
This
to this.
is perfect.
Yeah, and we had that before. We actually had that before any of the meetings. So she found the music.
Okay. So did you kind of
First.
choreograph or conceive it around the music, the pace of the music, the build in the
I,
music, or just fit it to the
Well,
music
I
later?
sort of, we chopped the music up into sections.
Yeah.
And so we knew that we had, like, okay, we've got 35 seconds of this mood.
Yeah.
And we need to get from point A to point B in the story.
Yeah.
So everything we shot, we just kind of had that mood in mind. So like the camera moves are slower and maybe more graceful. And then I know during this next section of the music, this is where like all the weird slow motion stuff happens.
Yeah.
And so we did a lot of takes of her like pulling the drapes down and twirling with them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
once we were running out of time, we like, all right, time to move on to the next
Yeah.
part of it. So.
And it seems like sometimes you were almost able to pace the film to the music. You slow it down and it matches the music, or something.
Right,
sudden.
right. And a lot of that, I mean, we shot all of her slow motion stuff. We shot everything in 160 frames.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we resampled that to 24, so it's very slow. So I literally have hours of Morgan very slowly spinning in that set.
Really?
And so anything that's not super slow has been sped up in post.
Okay. Okay. Let's talk about creating the character a little bit, because you talked about liking to paint actresses, you know, and we'll see a little bit of that in your next film too. Why do you find that so effective in film? Why do you think you're using that so much, or how does it work well for you?
It's just something I like to do. I like that it brings sort of an otherworldliness
Yeah.
to the character.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It is that kind of
more
playing
of a,
with reality that you're talking about. It's not a reality shot. Nobody's going to confuse this with reality
right.
someplace.
Right.
But it has a very real effect.
Right. So it has an emotional consistency to it, which is really important. Without that, it's super boring, like anything is. Yeah, so I just kind of prefer a stylized approach.
Yeah.
When I was doing design, I liked like really simple design, limited color palettes, like sort of more flat kind of looks. And so I try to bring that in sometimes, just because I think it makes things more striking. So, I don't know. But the makeup on the character was completely Adriana's design.
Okay.
Like I had very little like contribution as far as like what her costume was going to be or how she was going to be made up.
Right.
Adriana and Morgan and her mother sort of figured all that stuff out.
Yeah.
And I was a lot more involved in sort of how the shot sequence was going to work.
Yeah.
And I had a hand in sort of in the environment and all of the talcum powder that was flying everywhere.
Yeah.
That sort of stuff. So.
So now that it's over, you liked it. Did you learn what you wanted to? Did you get out of the project what you wanted to get out of it in terms of working with film?
Yeah, I think in this one, I finally conquered like time ramping.
Yeah.
Like it worked.
Yeah.
And then there's some other like earlier projects, like I mentioned before, where I attempted that and it didn't work.
Okay.
Like we tried it, some of it was technical, like we shot it with an EX1 overcranked. But with shutter roll, when someone like moves vertically in slow motion, they stretch and squash because the sensor can't keep up with them.
Okay.
It's kind of a mess. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we learned on that.
Okay, so that kind of leads into your next film. Let's talk about that, Aquaphobia. And before we show it or talk about it specifically, can you give us a little background about how you came up with this production, how long it took to put it together, and how long it's been released?
Sure. Well, it started off just as like a note, just like I'm a journaler. So it started off just as a note in a journal. And I wound up writing this like really sort of bad quatrain about drowning. And I am I'm not afraid of the water, but I should be. When I was in college in the 90s, I had a series of nightmares about drowning. And in the dream that finished the series, I actually started like breathing underwater. And then the nightmares stopped. The problem though is I think I sort of programmed my subconscious not to be afraid to breathe underwater. And this is a Jungian thing, right?
Yeah.
You have, there's cases of mountain climbers who've dreamed about flying. In their analysis. And then they'll be out climbing a mountain and then they'll just spontaneously let go of the wall. Like for a moment, that thought just hits.
Yeah.
And then without even thinking about it, they just,
wow.
like the part that should be terrified of falling suddenly believes it can fly, and that can lead to real danger for the human being, which is terrifying.
Yeah.
There's a French term, which I'm not going to butcher, but its translation is the call of the void. And I think that's what it's talking about, where there's something that intellectually you know is self-destructive, but emotionally you feel almost compelled to go and do.
Wow.
Like saying it's an impulse to self-destruction is too simple because you know it's there and you know to watch out for it, hopefully. I don't know, the French have a word for it. Maybe it happens a lot in France.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
So that is present in me with like water. Like I'm not afraid to be underwater, even when maybe I should be. I try to hold my breath for too long, and that sort of thing. And so I wrote a little poem about what it would be like to drown, and trying to like while you're drowning, trying to remember what breathing was like. But because you're not present in the air, it's a physical thing. You can't just sit here and remember what breathing is like if you're holding your breath. You have to be doing it to know it, which is another sort of concept that's in the piece.
Yeah.
And so I was playing with those, and then after string theory, I wanted to do more with like the similar kind of fabric dynamics, and still sort of a very graceful sort of dance-oriented piece. But I really wanted to do it like without gravity, and so that means underwater. And then around the same time, I had gotten a GoPro to play with, and I was shooting another project with a guy named Mark Rader, and we're shooting Low Road Baby, which is his latest film, well, as far at least as when we're recording this. And there's some scenes there where there's an infant sort of crawling through traffic, and then there's like trucks overrunning the kid and stuff. And so we needed a very small camera to get underneath like the trucks, right?
To get
So
that shot, yeah.
so I got a GoPro for that, and then it can shoot underwater. And,
Oh.
my wife is an avid swimmer, so we shot a bunch of swimming pool footage with it. And there's like some tests on YouTube from that. And that all just started to sort of come together at the same time. So I'm like, well, I have this underwater camera, and I want to do like an underwater, like it actually started off as an underwater photo shoot idea, just like to create some artistic images.
Yeah.
And then the poem happened, and I thought, well, this could make a neat premise for a short film. So I started jotting some ideas down. And then in the summer of 2012, which to me now in time was last summer, a friend of mine got me on a small crew with a New York filmmaker named Ed Bose, and he's a fine art filmmaker and does a lot of experimental work. And I was sort of exposed and really enjoyed kind of what his process was to filmmaking, where he had, rather than a script and a shot list, it's just sort of an outline of the sentiments he wanted to express. And he sort of found his way through the script. Like he casted and got the right performers in a location, but he would find the shots and compose them almost as if he was composing fine art photography. And it was more of feeling your way through the story that way, as opposed to having a really rigid script and outline right up front. So I really wanted to borrow that approach and experiment with it and see how that, what would it feel like to shoot a project that way. And it was great. And so literally, I mean, we shot Aquaphobia. I think we were only on set for 3 days. And we had a day, and none of those days were full days. We had, there's a dream sequence where he's remembering like air. So I wanted, so my thought there is I wanted air like to be manifest. So like what could I get that was blowing and windy? So we have like dry grass that's blowing. So it's the opposite of being underwater. Unfortunately, it was autumn when we shot this, so the leaves had just turned orange. And so I had Kendra and Mark Mook, Kendra Buck, who's Kendra's from Colorado Springs. They came up and we were just in a park in Denver, and we just wandered around and shot a bunch of atmospheric stuff. And then I also wanted her breathing to be part of the score. And so I made sure that we got some really tight shots of her like, sort of breathing in Mark's ear, because the thought is that he was going to be remembering this stuff. And yeah, so that was like 3 hours. We just went down and wandered around and shot that stuff. We had about a half a day on my brother's sailboat up at Carter Lake. And he's a member of the sailing club up there. And so we just floated around, and it was tricky not to get like the dry mountains in the background of all the shots. Right?
Wild, yeah.
If you're in the middle of Colorado, what do you do? So I had a day on the boat. And again, the same thing. I had some like ideas for what I wanted as far as coverage of boat stuff. But I had never been on his boat really before, so we just went up there and just shot it out. And then the most time-consuming part of that piece was figuring out exactly how the underwater sequences were going to work. And so we did a lot of tests. And so she's head to toe in body paint. She's basically wearing body paint and some handkerchiefs. And so we had to find body paint that wouldn't wash off, because that would be embarrassing and awkward for the actress. And then at one point I was going to cover her with scales. And the idea was that they would actually flex underwater. So if she dropped back in the water, they would all like stand up and bristle, which would be a really cool effect. And we actually did a test of that with Kendra, and it just didn't read underwater. So we scrapped that. So we were actually in the pool like 2 or 3 days just getting the tests done. We did all the auditions underwater at the pool that we shot in. So I've got some great audition footage of normally talented and absolutely stunning actresses looking pained and anguished, trying to hold their breath and swim gracefully at the same time.
I can imagine.
It was really a unique experience, I think, for a lot of them. But Madison, who we ultimately cast, like she's already a fish. She was like on swim team in high school for a lot of years, and we put her in the water, and she was more comfortable underwater, I think, than on the shore.
It looks like it, really. It's amazing.
And she killed the audition. She did everything that we wanted. We could have just shot the film with her audition footage, honestly. And then she was really enthusiastic. She was wanted to try new shots, and she was developing ideas, and she had the character without my having to tell her anything. And so I knew as a director, that was a complete load off. I can just put her in the water, and she's going to do exactly what's right. The actual shoot was a little bit different because the costume got more elaborate. So it was a lot more fabric, and fabric means drag. And so all of her mental calculations for how to get to the bottom, to the surface again, were off. So it took her a lot longer to get back to the air. And so what we wound up doing is we rented some snorkel gear. And so I was standing on the bottom of the pool with the GoPro, breathing in the scuba gear. And then Mark Mook was on the other regulator right next to me,
Yeah.
underwater. And so she would come down and do her bit. And whenever she was in trouble, she would make eye contact with Mark. And he would swim in and like take her to the shore. And I think we almost drowned her like 4 times
Oh, wow. Wow.
during our half-day shoot of
Yeah.
all the underwater bits.
Yeah.
But we got it.
Yeah. Okay, let's just, we've already talked about it so much. Let's go ahead and look at the film.
Sure.
And we've got a lot more to talk about, but let's look at it because I think they're going to love it. I know they're going to love it.
Great.
All right? Okay. Another film by our filmmaker, David Quakenbush. This one is Aquaphobia.
It must be hard now. Here's something we hope you'll really like.
The longest anyone's held their breath, 21 minutes and 33 seconds.
20 minutes is a long time.
The longest anyone's held their breath is about 20 minutes.
Easy.
Minutes is a long time.
It's easy. So easy.
Breath. Breathe. Breath. Breathe.
20 minutes.
So easy.
We breathe all the time,
You return to me.
20
but we only notice when the air is gone.
long minutes.
When you so long.
So long.
They are so long.
The smell. The tickle. A long forgotten dream when the air is gone.
Clear, blue, black embrace. Return to me.
Days. Years. Lifetimes. So long.
So easy. When you're long. You are so long to return to me.
Welcome back to Colorado Cinema Spotlight. That was just the film Aquaphobia by our filmmaker, David Quakenbush. Really a beautiful film.
Thanks.
Really a beautiful film. You were talking about Madison, the actress who does the swimmer, who does the music, the water creature. And she really is, I think she's just phenomenal. And the way you pulled it off and made her look so incredibly beautiful at the same time as being this very, very kind of
Well, she's already
uncanny
incredibly beautiful.
character.
I just have to turn the camera on.
Yeah,
right?
even with white makeup with her hair flying in the water.
That
Yeah.
magic all happens in
Yeah,
casting.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Did you have any idea that you were going to have that kind of, be able to get across that kind of impression? I mean,
that was sort of the hope, was to get that feeling across. And really, at the middle of pieces like this, there's like a feeling at the middle, and you just keep like shooting stuff until you get the shots that communicate that.
Yeah.
Like until you can tell that story, you just keep sort of chipping away at it.
Yeah.
So it was really highly successful, I think, in that it just hit the chord that I really wanted it to hit.
Well, what seems unusual to me is that she's such a frightening character. She really is kind of scary, but so incredibly beautiful and,
So
and
attractive, right.
graceful. Yeah, it's
Right.
it's a really nice combination.
Right, right.
Works really, really well.
I read, Lou Hunter wrote a book about script writing, and he lets out one of the trade secrets that, well, you know, as a visual artist, you have primary colors. So you can paint with yellow, blue, or red, and you can mix all of the other colors in the universe from those.
Yeah.
And he says that when you're writing, you only have two primary colors when you're writing a story. To engage someone's emotions, you have to like use or mix one or both of these. And it's sex and violence. And as trite as that sounds, and as sort of annoying as that can be to some people who don't want that to be true, it's true. If you don't have either of those in your piece, people are just going to be bored by it. And so what I'm trying to do is figure out how to like get those two things as intense and close to each other without being gory or garish.
Yeah, yeah,
And so really the trick is that she's seducing him off of the boat.
yeah.
And then like ultimately she is just delighted that
Yeah.
she's so happy that he drowns, right? So,
Wow, that's an interesting concept and interesting kind of ideology to follow through in making films, especially video films when you're talking about those are the colors for writing. So that's
Right.
interesting. That's interesting. This film's fairly recent, right? It's new on the market, shall we say?
right. Well, right now it's October 2012, and I finished it last week.
Yeah.
Well, not last week, but it premiered last week.
Yeah.
And then we were shooting it. As I sit here right now, we had the original production schedule had us still shooting right now.
Right.
And we wrapped it up about 3 weeks early because it started to get cold and it was an outdoor pool.
Yeah. How did you do those shots? How did you do the underwater shots? You kind of talked about being in a tank or a pool.
Yeah,
or...
we were in, there's an athletic club. I'm blanking on the name, but you can flash the title under, right? It's at Monaco and Yale in Denver. And they were gracious enough to let us shoot in their outdoor pool. And so we roped off half of the deep end, and we were just shooting there. And the pool was open, so you can't see it, but I had to cut out, like there's little kids underwater with their snorkel masks on watching us film.
Watching you, yeah.
And in some of the shots, if you ever see the raw footage, in some of the shots you can see like their little legs kicking like on the side. And then there's places where I had to like erase the lap lines
Yeah.
from the background.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so we just an afternoon at the pool.
Yeah.
And it was the least. Well, Madison was kind of stressed out because we kept almost drowning her. But it was really
Doesn't, yeah.
like the shoot was like being on vacation. It's just like hanging out at the pool and
Yeah.
rolling film.
For you,
openings and-
yeah, underneath the camera.
Yeah,
Sure,
yeah.
sure. So you haven't had a lot of response from it yet, but does it have any screenings coming up that you know of or anything like that?
I haven't really submitted it anywhere yet, so we'll see how it does. And I'm trying online distribution right now, so I'm sort of. It's on Vimeo. I just put it on YouTube, and it's on my website as well at redrinkitblack.com.
Yeah.
So if anybody wants to see it, go and watch it.
Yeah.
And if you think anyone else would enjoy it, email it to them, and
Yeah.
and see where it goes.
Yeah, we never really talked about your day job. We should probably mention that real quickly at least. So you work where?
I'm a multimedia producer for online education at the Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design.
Okay.
And my role there, really, I work with the online education team. So we build all the web-based classes. And it's a fine art college. And so my job is to create all of the demonstrations that are necessary for our internet students to like learn how to do all of those things, like use either Maya
Yeah.
or like we're doing illustration right now. So there's a lot of painting classes I'm shooting right now.
Okay.
There's a new semester every 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And we're laying track while the train's running. So every 8 weeks there's a new batch of classes, and we've got 8 weeks to finish all of them.
Wow. Wow.
So we just like nonstop shooting. And it's made me really, like that experience I think has made me really efficient and a really competent improviser, to where I kind of know what kind of shots are going to snap together. And so there isn't a lot of waste as far as planning and uncertainty. Like I know I need these 12 like setups, and we can just get them.
Yeah.
And we don't need to have a big meeting between each camera setup or between each take. Like we'll just shoot the thing out and it'll edit just fine.
Yeah.
And
I think you really are a model of efficiency. I think it comes from that background because to be able to put it together, a project like this, most filmmakers couldn't even attempt it. But
yeah, I
here
think
you
we
did
did the
it
whole
so
thing.
quickly.
I think we did the
and
whole
so
thing in
well.
less than a month.
Wow.
Kind of. And then, but it took a little while to get the script. We didn't even have a proper script, but it took me a few weeks to get the story and the concept together. And once that clicked, you just shoot it, and
Yeah.
it's done, right?
Yeah.
But as I'd mentioned before, like this project didn't come out of nowhere. Like in a certain sense, I've been like working on this film for 10 years, right? And, like I've shot a lot of time ramping, and it culminated in this film. And I've been shooting a lot of sort of jump cut, experimental, stylized space pieces, and all of that sort of culminated in this film. So it's not like this just happened from scratch.
Right.
It builds on top of everything else that I've ever shot and tried to put together.
And it's leading into whatever's coming up next.
Right, and who knows what that'll be.
Well, but you're not just a person who just does only shorts, because you have a feature length coming
It's
out,
not.
right?
It's only 20 minutes.
20 minutes, okay, okay. But it's Automaton, right?
Right.
It's going to be released.
Someday, it will get finished. And I know, like my cinematographer and some of the performers, sort of don't believe me when I say that.
Yeah,
but
I suppose.
It'll be finished.
Good.
We've been at Picture Lock for about 8 months, and it's really visual effects heavy. And this thing was really an ordeal. It was like a year and a half writing the script. It was like a 25-page script, which I rewrote from scratch about 3 times in that
Right.
period. And then I had like a community of writers and collaborators who just helped me on story development. So like there were things broken in the story that I had to go back and fix and rewrite. And it completely changed from the original draft. Like really profoundly changed from the first set of ideas to what we actually shot. And again, I was still in that Hollywood mode at this time. So I was
Yeah.
thinking like, what is that like? If I really wanted to like figure out that kind of a production process, what steps could I do to ensure success of a really complicated piece?
Good experiment, good process.
And
yeah.
my thought also, I wanted to set this up as, I wanted it to be as rigorous as like if I was going to do a proper like theatrical release project, but I had to make it fit into like what I could fund on my tax refund. So it's not a 2 hour, it's not a 90-minute piece, it's 20 minutes. Because I can do a 20-minute piece and not go bankrupt.
Right.
Right.
And
And then
it's still a huge challenge, yeah.
And it was 7 days on set. We shot it. Everybody involved took a week off, and we just shot it sequentially, like 16-hour days, 7 days in a row. And so in my memory, it's like one long day. And at the end of that, I remember waking up the day after the shoot, I was taking a nap on the couch, and I sat up in my living room, and I was trying to figure out why the set looked like my house. Like it's just like you get in a weird place when you're on set for that long.
Sure.
But
sure.
it was really intense. We shot it again at Colorado Film School. I was gracious enough to let us into their big studio for that whole time. We had the 1 week in between semesters. Usually that studio is booked up and reserved for all of the classes they teach in there.
Yeah.
And there's a little gap in between where you can get in there and do special stuff sometimes.
Oh, good.
And then my cinematographer was one of their cinematography professors there. So he was able to sort of get us in,
Good.
and Frederick, who's amazing and generous and gracious, let us in. He let us repaint the floor of the studio and do everything that was in there. I'm not sure where I was going with that whole chain of thought. but-
There's some nice background footage of you doing this process too that I saw on your website, or I had a
right,
link
and
to it.
and Vadim shot
It was
that.
interesting.
This was Vadim Elkind, I think that's how you pronounce his last name. He's really just an amazing guy. I met him on Automaton. He showed up to be an extra.
Uh-huh.
And part of the story is it's a universe populated by these robots. And so I needed a bunch of people to be robots. We dressed them all the same. And they march around in the background of all the shots, or a lot of the exteriors anyway. And so he
Yeah.
was one of those, and I had no idea that he was also a filmmaker. He just sort of answered the ad on Facebook to come and perform. But he was shooting footage with his little like point and shoot the whole time.
Cool.
And out of nowhere, he edits this amazing behind the scenes piece. And he's basically been on every single project of mine since then. And he always just kind of does this. Like he's usually assistant camera or a camera operator, but he'll just do interviews and record things that are going on and
Yeah.
cut together great little pieces. So he's
Yeah.
a good guy
Yeah.
to have around.
Yeah, you seem to connect really well with the people that you work with. Is that kind of? I'm sure there's been some people that you don't connect with, and then just kind of falls by the
Sure,
wayside.
sure.
but-
Well, I try. I handpick who I work with, and there are some projects where I have like the team that I know is going to work and fit, and then I can just like gather the forces and put them to work, and we can go shoot something amazing. Then I have other projects where I vet new people, and so I have all of these people that have either been referred to me or that I've met and have like asked if they could work on something, and so I'll put a project together just to throw those people together and see how everybody does.
Yeah.
And more often than not, I'm like happy with how everybody like fits together and how they work
Good.
together. Worm was one of those projects where it was just completely, it was either all new people or it was people doing jobs they had never done before.
Yeah.
Shay Kent, who produced that one, usually does production design for me.
Yeah.
But she was like, she had some free time and she calls me and she says, I really want to try to produce something. Oh, I've got this script. And so we just kind of
Funny
ran
you
with
should
it
ask.
from there. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So the group for Automaton, they worked pretty good together.
Yeah,
For 1
Automaton-
week, you could all live together and produce.
Right, right. And it was, 6 days is a long time to not pay somebody.
Yeah.
So, you have a little bit of turnover as you go along. And part of the reality of low budget is you're always a little bit shorthanded.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of grueling to get all the way through it.
Sure.
But,
But you
yeah.
succeeded.
but we made it.
Okay. Should we look at the trailer?
Sure.
Let's look at the trailer. Okay. Here's the trailer for the upcoming film Automaton by our filmmaker David Quakenbush.
You own a housekeeper?
That's none of your business.
Do you or don't you?
Everybody owns a housekeeper.
Welcome home, sir.
Here. Where every thought will be tuned to figuring out how to make you happy.
I'm sorry, sir. I don't understand.
What don't you understand? That sounds fantastic.
That's what it looks like.
That's what wood looks like.
The world outside, blue over green.
Green.
You open that crate, she's yours for good.
Hello, Gary.
Error. Please try again.
She used to tell me about the world before the city. Grass and trees, and it was all over the place.
Close your eyes.
We'll just pick a direction and go. And this time we won't stop until we find it.
You're talking crazy again. There is no out there anymore. Maybe once upon a time in your little fantasy, but not anymore. Margaret?
I thought you might like a surprise.
That was the trailer for Automaton by our filmmaker David Quakenbush. Great. I can't wait to see it.
I can't wait to finish it.
Hurry and release it, right,
Right.
right. Okay, so what do you have in mind for this film? You said you're still working on the visual aspect of it. Where are you going with
Right. Well, there's a lot of post-production is really complicated with this piece. There's we have to create a whole sort of artificial world for it. So my visual effects guy, Alex Gray, who's amazing, is sort of brushing up on his Maya skills, and he's finishing up. He just graduated from Regis in film, and so he just finished his senior thesis project, and he had some other things he wanted to put to bed before really getting back to Automaton.
Yeah.
And so he has assured me that he's going to finish his part. But basically, he's building everything that's out the window.
Yeah.
And so in the trailer, there's sort of like buildings and stuff that's out there. But those are just sketches. He has a real world that he's going to put out there. And we have a lot of moving camera shots, so we have to motion track all of that in 3D software with what the camera's doing actually on set.
Amazing.
And about a third of the film takes place in various like subways and trains. And we shot all those green screen. So we have to come up with what is flashing by out the window. So they're in tunnels, but we have to create all the tunnel walls and synchronize the lights that flicker as people go by and all of that stuff. So, but it's going to be really, I think, really beautiful when it's finished.
I have no doubt.
But
after
it's a
seeing
slog to get it
Acrophobia.
done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Now, you talked about Worm briefly too, just before we went to that trailer. That's another film that you're just releasing?
I just released Worm, and I did Worm really as sort of like a cool down exercise after Automaton. Because Automaton was like, there's nothing found in that movie. We built all the sets, and we had to construct the entire world from scratch. And like, there's very detailed costumes. And the whole thing basically is fabricated, which ties into the theme of the movie.
Right.
But it's just like a ridiculous amount of work. And there's so many special effects, and it was, really long in post-production. And where we're at in post right now is we're waiting for other people to get parts back. And so there's a sound mix that's happening, but he has to record, like you have to invent what that world sounds like from scratch, and that takes time. And I have to like let my sound mixer have the time that he needs to find those effects, and we meet once in a while and figure out how to tweak things. It just takes a while to get all that stuff back.
Wow.
So to kill time, I like made more movies. And so my thought with The Worm is, what could I do that was the opposite of Automaton? Like Automaton was grueling, and it was a year in development, and then it's going to be like more than a year in post-production. What can I do that's fast and as simple as possible? Let's have one location, just 2 characters, and make it just really story-driven in that room. And so I have a friend, Alan August, who has been sending me script ideas for a long time, and I had never really directed something written by another person before, and I wanted to see, and again, thinking at this point, like, if I ever want to go make feature films, the reality is someone else will probably write a lot of the scripts. And what is that like? And how will I engage with a story that I didn't write every word of? And so I wanted to sort of flesh that out with Worm. So Alan wrote the script, and we did some minor revisions together, and then I just sort of ran with it. And so I did like all of the production design and visualization and sort of that strategy. And then, as I'd mentioned before the break, I got all new people to sort of help with it. So brand new people who've never done production design for me, like helped bring all the props together. And then Tim Nolte was the DP, and he helped camera operate a couple of other projects with me. And he AC'd for me on some other films. And so I thought, well, let's see how Tim does it like in the DP chair. So I'll just like give him those reins and see like where he goes with it. And then Vadim, who was an extra on Automaton, I wanted to see how he does his crew. So he was the assistant camera, and he did an amazing job, as well as creating probably the best behind the scenes ever. The behind the scenes is almost better than the actual film. So in a very real way, it was sort of therapeutic. Like, let's make something that is like fun and not complicated, and just like play it out in one place and not have to build the room from scratch in the process. And we shot it, Shay Kent was the producer, we shot it in her mother's spare bedroom. And most of the stuff in the room she had in the house. Like, she already sort of had the look that we were going for, so it was easy to dress the set. Jake Swain did a great job bringing in some other props. He found like the TV tray, and I guess you can watch it if you want. But he brought in the TV tray. He found like a little Baroque like spoon that she feeds him oatmeal with. Like, he just found every detail. It was great. So I'm excited to work with Jake.
So it was therapeutic after Automaton.
It was great.
Back on track after that.
Yeah, and it went fast. Like, we turned the whole thing around in a month. Also, Worm was the first time we did fundraising that actually paid for the film.
Wow.
And we still have some, like a little bit left in the kitty, which we'll use for festival submissions.
Great.
Shay just got married. So as soon as she's recovered from that experience, I'm going to politely and graciously request that we spend some time figuring out our distribution strategy for that one.
Okay, we didn't plan on doing this, but I guess we can take a look at at least a clip from Worm.
Sure.
All right, let's do it. This is a clip from the film Worm by our filmmaker David Quakenbush.
Normie, time to eat. Come on, baby brother. You have to get up. Come on. Can you sit up?
Is it dinner already?
No. We tried dinner last night. It's morning.
Close the window.
Calm down, Norman. You're gonna be fine. Just get plenty of rest and drink lots of fluids like the doctor said.
I don't need fluids. He knows. He punishes me. We must sneak in medicine. Mix it into a cake. He'll devour the icing. And he'll fall back to hell. He doesn't like it when we plan.
Can you eat?
Yes. You didn't mix in any cinnamon. You know he won't eat oatmeal without cinnamon.
We're out of cinnamon.
Thought you could fool him? He's not so gullible, Alice. He punishes you when he finds you're playing tricks on him.
Well, maybe we'll punish him by not giving him anything to eat till I get home tonight.
Punish him. Excellent idea. Excellent indeed. But still, you should have known.
Yes, I should have known.
And that was a clip from the film Worm by our filmmaker David Quakenbush. Great, really different than your other stuff. Glad we got a chance to see it.
Thanks, yeah, it was fun to make.
Yeah, now again, you mentioned this earlier, but we want to give people a chance to see your work, and they need to know where to do that. So if you can
Sure.
tell them real quickly how to see this stuff.
Sure. You can watch the rest of Worm and most of my other work at wedrinkitblack.com.
Very good. And you have Facebook as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they can always or that's linked from
Yeah,
We
yeah.
Drink
My
Black.
Facebook link is on We Drink It Black,
Yeah.
and all my contact stuff is there. So.
Okay, great. Right. Thanks a lot for showing us your stuff, for coming on the show. We really appreciate
Yeah,
having
thanks for
you.
having
That's
me.
great. Okay.
Great.
And this has been Colorado Cinema Spotlight. Thanks for joining us. As always, we appreciate your comments and suggestions. You can reach us on Facebook, Colorado Cinema Spotlight on Facebook. There's other postings there about screenings, upcoming film showings, and updates on our previous filmmakers. So thanks for joining us.
Stay classy, Colorado.